Labor is an issue now bigger than it's ever been for this group of folks. And to try and illustrate that, something happened to me yesterday. I live about an hour south of here, so I got my bags packed, gassed up my truck, and went through a drive-through. Now, it's a nationwide fast food organization. I won't tell you what it is, but have it your way was one of their key sayings years ago. So I go to the intercom, and a female voice greets me, and I order a large sweet tea and a burger. Drive around to the window. There's an 18-year-old young man with a mouth full of braces, and he greets me, and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, we are out of sweet tea." And then he says, "Is there something else I can offer you?" Pause the story. Full marks for him and the people that trained him. He had an issue, he had to deal with it, and he gave me options. Okay, so good job by everybody around. Back to the story. I asked, well, what can I have? And he lists off sodas and coffee and stuff. And I said, well, how about some ice water? He said, sure, I can do that. Gives me the ice water. I give him my card. He runs the transaction, gives me my card and the receipt, and then he goes to check on the burger. And while I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the receipt, and he has charged me $3.49 for a cup of water. Wow. Now, I'm sure that he didn't deliberately intend to do this. And when he got back, he gave me the burger and said, "Thanks, have a great day." And I said, "Oh, excuse me, but do you know you charged me $3.49 for a cup of water?" And his exact response was, and I took that to mean that the training he had received was only partial. They hadn't taught him how to deal with a customer issue. Not that I was angry or upset or anything like that, but I just asked the question. And they hadn't trained him how to give a little refund. So with that in mind, let's talk to these guys, because they're the real experts on labor. And the first thing we're going to do, we're going to have a discussion about certain topics. And the first one is, how have modern workforce management platforms transformed your ability to balance costs with the employee quality of life? And has there been a performance impact?
Who'd like to go first?
Either one. Jump in.
I'll take it. Well, thanks. Anything that runs through an app with this generation is extremely helpful. And so what we've really found is that with the team member standpoint and our team members, all of our scheduling, deployment, everything is done through an app. Schedule requests, all that kind of stuff is done through an app. And so for them, it's much easier. They're much more efficient. And what's great for our management teams is it keeps them out of the office for hours on time trying to build this hefty schedule where now shifts are already built out for them. They just drag and drop based on availability and proficiency. And so they're out there with our guests, having that interaction, that hospitality standpoint. And so we've seen a huge ROI, in fact, of anything app-based that can be more efficient, move faster, and engage the team faster. It's a home run.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, I've been doing this a long time, and one thing I've learned about, I think someone said, or Abigail said it earlier, and I know Jason did earlier, it's the people business, right? Well, how do you get the best people? You have to start there.
Yep.
And all of us have restaurants, and we're all vying for the same pool, right? So how do we get the best ones? And I'm a firm believer the best ones are taken already, so you have to go get them. But I think, so understanding who that team member is important. So we start on the front end first by shortening the application cycle for them in the very beginning. So everyone lives off that phone now. So if they can apply for a job within 60 seconds or less, that's a big deal. So once we capture them, now they're doing 10 or 15 jobs at the same time. So once they apply, then we use technology now to get to them immediately. And we use AI to start talking to them, conversing through text, as an example. And what the questions we're asking is kind of defining that schedule for them,
yep,
what they prefer to work. So they're in the driver's seat of that conversation. Is this the right fit for me? And so what we have found is we've seen an increase in people actually showing up for the interview. I mean, how many of you heard stories where 100 people apply and they all schedule their interview and only 50 show up or less, right? That's a lot these days. We've actually seen a significant increase of that. And what we're finding is that since we can shorten that application cycle and we can kind of filter, what their needs are and they balance those with the restaurant needs, it makes it easier on the front end. And then the second is once we have them in, then it's really about the development of that individual, and where they come from is not where I came from. Whereas back in the day we had to take a 6-hour test to learn a menu, and if you didn't get 100%, you're fired. It doesn't work that way anymore. So I used a Scantron when I was in school. Today they've got laptops and iPads, right? They don't know what a number 2 pencil is. So our training is designed for what they're used to already, and that helps with retention. A lot of people make their decisions about they want to stay here in the first 48 hours of the day. So once we can capture in the beginning, we can retain them through the knowledge, from the training perspective. Then it's learning how to deploy that to execute in the restaurant, which I know we'll talk about a little later on. But that's where we start.
Cool. Can you guys share an experience where AI-driven labor forecasting has avoided overstaffing or understaffing?
Yeah, for us, we open a lot of restaurants. We average about 50 restaurants a year, and so what we've really been focused on the last 2 to 3 years is going from NRO, new restaurant opening, to normal ops. And so we've really utilized AI to take that sales trend and where we want to plateau at and how we can staff properly so that we are getting our guests to Freddy's way, but we're also not wasting labor. I mean, and we really look at utilizing labor where it's most important during the revenue periods, and where can we cut, and that's during opening and closing. And so that's why we really utilize that to make sure that we're running a very proficient shifts, but we're also not wasting labor, and we're not cutting too soon during the NRO process. So it's been extremely helpful. We've learned a ton, especially the fact that for us, the first 31 weeks is just extremely important in a new restaurant. And so making sure we knock it out of the park in that first 31 weeks is kind of where you stabilize. And so we're making sure that we're staffed, but we're using that labor efficiently. And so, because we're very franchise-based, and so we want our franchisees to have a great ROI, but also open their first restaurant and then make so much money they want to open a second, third, fourth, and fifth. And so it's very focused on making sure that first 31 weeks is really labor efficient.
Yeah, we've approached labor a little bit differently. I think it's really easy. You look at the prime cost of P&L, you've got your food and you've got your labor, right? People, when they talk about labor, they want to start with labor. We actually did something different. We said, okay, so, and kind of to your point here, if you have a checking account, you don't write a check when there's no money in the account, right? And typically sales don't come in before opening or after close. So you gotta be efficient on both ends. So when are you gonna write the check? When sales are coming in. So we approached it from this perspective. If you take our entire production, right, and what I mean by that is your prep items, for example. And if we said, okay, so every item you prep has a shelf life. And the purpose of a shelf life is to protect the quality of and the integrity of the product itself for the brand, right? So for example, if I'm using diced Roma tomatoes, okay, it might have a day, day and a half, 2 day shelf life on it. Now I can eat that tomato on day 5. I'm not gonna die, okay? But the reality is every item in there has a shelf life predicated upon brand protection, right? So if we know that, then we say, okay, well, how often should I prep that? What's the frequency of that prep, okay? So if you have 100 items on your prep list as an example, and everything goes between 1 day shelf life to 7 days. So if it's 7 day, let's prep it every 4 days. And then I take that entire list and I say, let's put it on a calendar and 7 days a week and figure out how I can ensure that I'm doing the same amount of prep on a daily basis, right? So let's assume it's 50 of the 100 you have to do every single day. So what happens in our business is most of our sales typically happen Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? 60%, sometimes more than that on those days of the week. So operators say, well, I want to make sure my prep is ready to go for the weekend so I can execute, right? So what happens? They get their butt kicked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, do their thing. Monday morning they come in, what happens? There's not a lot of prep. So what do? They start prepping like it's no tomorrow. And it's the slowest day of the week. So they're spending all this money without sales being there. So what happens on Wednesday? Their regional calls them and says, what the hell is going on with labor? You got to cut labor. So the GM goes, oh, damn it, I'm going to do that. You got it, boss. Hangs up the phone. Everyone go home. It's 12 o'clock. I know it's lunch, but go home. I got to make labor. And they cut their schedule for Friday, Saturday, Sunday where they can execute. So it's like, well, why would you do that? those are your Super Bowl days. Why would you do that? So if we can standardize or normalize the prep schedule, then I can normalize the labor associated with that schedule. So I'm spending the same amount of money before opening on a Monday as I am on a Saturday or Sunday. So a lot of the finance guys say, well, then you don't need that labor, excess labor. I will argue with the finance guy every single day of the week, because now I redeploy that labor to execute. So when I do that, what happens? In theory, what happens is that, one, my speed of service is better.
Yep.
Number two, my wait times are less in the front. So as people are driving by, they don't see that long line to get in. They're going to say, I'll go check it out. So top line sales start to build. Then the shifts are executed better, so we're not comping and voiding and things out as much. And now I'm executing like I'm on a Saturday or Sunday on a Monday and Tuesday. And labor's not even a conversation.
Yep.
And the cool thing is using AI with that, it's predictive prep. So it'll tell you based upon behaviors, it's always learning whether on what to produce. So that reduces your waste. So we've done this over the last, we tested for about 12 months. And the last 3 periods we've rolled it out. And we've dropped, just in cost of goods alone, in 3 periods, 120 basis points. Woo. So on a $60 million a year business, that's $620,000.
That's a lot of bucks.
And so the finance guy says, well, I want the money. Well, we'll redeploy some of that cash. But that's utilizing the AI, not approaching it from how do I cut labor, how to do this. It's how do I normalize that? Because at the end of the day, particularly back of the house, behavior-based, right? And I can prove that theory by who's ever closed a restaurant on Christmas Eve. It's amazing how fast your cooks can get out on Christmas Eve. But yet that following Tuesday, it's like, come on, let's go, guys. So once they understand, you normalize that schedule, you normalize the behaviors, so it's pretty straightforward after that.
All right, so some guidance for these folks. When you shifted from viewing labor as a cost line item to seeing it as a strategic investment, what metrics or KPIs did you start looking at, and what were the surprises that you found in looking at them?
Sure. In our brand with Freddy's, we've always viewed labor as an investment. We're very hospitality driven. Before COVID, we were doing 70% dine-in business, and so we always staffed up for that dine-in business. Drive-through was just kind of an afterthought, and COVID made us get better at drive-through. And really, how do we take that hospitality point to the drive-through window, and then also how do we take that hospitality point to the digital orders? And so what we really started tracking at that point was our voice of the guest. We brought on a whole digital hospitality team so we could pull in from all different aspects and see how we're doing. But we also, just in the last 2 years, started looking at negative incident rates. And so really started to look at what our guests are telling us. We brought in a vendor where we could get better guest feedback. And now we rank that throughout the nation on how you're doing with a negative incident rate. And because we can attack that as real knowledgeable feedback from our guests, where we lack and where we can get better, and then we attack that with a gazelle-like focus. And so that's really, when we really started looking at voice of the guest and that negative incident rate, that's really where we started to get better in all aspects. That's where we started getting better at speed of service, accuracy, everything else, because we really listen to what the guests are telling us. They're going to be driving the ship and telling us what they want, what we're doing wrong, and where we need to get better.
Yeah, very similar. Many of the same KPIs. I would add that one thing we did was everyone wants to know. I'm a simple person, by the way. I'm probably the least intelligent person in this room. But I just want to know, am I winning or am I losing? What's winning look like, right? So we put a monitor in the kitchen that has every prep cook as an example, and their prep items are assigned to them, and it color codes it based on how efficient they are in it. So the cool thing is that they're all competing with themselves. That's really cool. And so they internally they want to get better. Then we color coded it, green, yellow, red. Well, they want to be green all the time. And the nice thing is that the managers, when they're doing their figure eights and walking through the restaurant, they know the score of the game the entire time. They know exactly where they're at in prep. So we look at that, look at the efficiencies on that. Net promoter scores, NPS, of course, that's the big thing today in the social media. Speed of service, of course. I also look at the discount line and seeing, well, how well are we executing the shifts? Back in the day, when I was a young manager, if I had a comp or a void, there was no HR involved. It was a conversation outside that you walked in going, I can't tell anybody what I just heard. And now it's, well, I'm just going to comp it. Well, why? What's the root cause of the comp? If it's one thing building the business is one, but if it's because we screwed up, Let's fix that. So that's another KPI we look at. And what's amazing is that if you can focus on executing the shift, the labor it's not even a conversation. Matter of fact, I don't remember the last time I actually had a conversation about labor, at least in our company, especially since we've done this.
Until now.
Until today.
Yeah. But that's a good, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, we're very sales driven. We look at top line sales.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think we all know it, sales hide all your sins. And so if you can continue to drive your sales and do really well at sales, to your point, your labor conversation starts to be minimized. Now, we don't like to waste labor, so we're always going to look at that line, the bottom line as well. But as long as you can continue to have positive comp sales and you continue are driving the shifts and running good shifts, labor does become kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. What specific People First initiative seemed like a serious financial risk initially, but then turned out to be able to provide measurable returns?
Sure. For us, it was completely revamping our training program. So our training program with Freddy's is Freducation. We first rolled it out in 2012, and we had not done, and it was very paper-based books, everything of that nature, and people, especially this generation, these kids, including my kids, learn differently than we did 10, 15 years ago. And so last year, we took our whole resource development team and completely revamped it. We knocked 30% off the training time. We went away from paper books, went all digital, put iPads in all the restaurants, which is very costly. But they now train based on how they live their lives. So all of our training videos, think about a TikTok video of, between 3 to 5 minutes, if that. We try to max it out at 5 minutes or less. And so they are getting the information they need. They're absorbing it, and they're getting hands-on, which is making them a lot more efficient. And we also utilize a KDS system where they don't have to memorize recipes anymore. So we are getting away from memorizing recipes, where our KDS systems basically it's an image-based. So whatever comes on the burger, it just shows it. Unless you're on a pickle, there's a picture of what you have to do with it. And so it's putting that money out to really do that, and a whole department to take 8 months to do that was a big risk, but the ROI has been fantastic. Like a 30% reduction in training, retention's already up, turnover's down, and the biggest thing that we didn't think about was internal promotion. So we're actually seeing a better trained team member pool that want to stay in the business and get to that next level.
Outstanding.
So.
Yeah, 3 years ago, we set an aggressive goal because we had significant growth, and the goal was 70% internal promotion rate into management. And as of end of Q3, we're at 76% in the company. And how do we do that? Well, a lot of the same similar things that you just discussed. But I think something that was real important for us was we want to make sure that the voice of the team is heard. And we got to make sure the top and the bottom is connected at all given times. And one, make sure I have a voice to them, and they have a voice directly to me. So we worked with this company called Go Happy. And basically what it is when we onboard a team member, they get into their system and they get an immediate text message. And it's walking them to the company. They get a link to all the benefits or any resources they need. And then as they get their 30 and 60, 90s, in the system, it congratulates them for achieving those milestones. It sends them a survey about how we're doing. And then they get free gifts. Like, for example, if you've made it through a week of training, you get breakfast for free as an example, and they have a little thing they can scan to do that. And that was a major investment we put into them. And the other thing was, too, is we decided, well, let's do quarterly surveys automatically. So I challenged the team to say, I want a high participation rate. How do we do that? Well, we're in the mid to high 60% on participation, with a top box score of 84% on satisfied being there. And we take those, 2 or 3 or 4 top areas of that we need to work on as an organization, and we address them every quarter. We have a community that does that, and that was a major investment we made on the frontline side. Besides the L&D with our LMS system and our onboarding platforms and so on and so forth, and our retention has never been as well. I mean, our manager turnover rate this year is 17%, which is
that's great,
awesome. But there was a little gamble there to say, okay, so let's open up the doors here and see what we get, and knock on wood, it's been a good investment thus far.
Good. Okay, now real quick, How do you ensure hiring, training, and scheduling decisions reinforce your brand promise to your guests?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we as long as we have 3 pillars: quality, cleanliness, and hospitality. As long as it falls in those aspects and it makes our team more efficient and we can do more with less, then that's what we're always looking for. And if it falls outside of that, because if we can get faster but it hurts the hospitality standpoint, no, we're not going to do it. If we can get faster but it hurts the quality standpoint, no, we're not going to do it. But if we can get faster, have the team do less, and utilize technology to bridge that gap between hard and easy, then that's a win for us. And so that's really how we kind of measure that litmus test is we will never have a kiosk in our restaurants because we believe that the guest to team member interaction is that important. And plus we think all of our guests have a kiosk in their pocket. And so really utilizing that digital order mode. And so it's really making sure that we never sacrifice those 3 pillars on what we're looking at doing that gets away from that Freddy's experience.
Yeah, similarly, we have 3 pillars as well. It's like we've done this before.
I know, it's crazy.
People, brand recipe, which equals fiscal responsibility. You can't have fiscal responsibility without the other 2. And the lead step in the dance is always our people at the end of every day. So I think what we've done as an organization at the top level is create what I call the banks of the river, right? And here are the non-negotiables. The water can't go outside these banks of the river. You're allowed to float through that river, right? But we don't ever, because the brand is protected, the river's protected through those banks. So we've established that as an organization. We do that through multiple things, through not only our technology platforms, but how we measure our KPIs or how we budget our restaurants, so on and so forth. And it's a constant validation of that, understanding are you winning or losing. And once you create that culture of winning and what that tastes like, then it gets addictive. And that flywheel of success starts to spin to almost it becomes out of control. And you ask yourself 9, 10 years later, how'd you get there? And it started with those pillars, people first, protect our brand at all costs. You do those things, you're gonna make money. And when people buy into that, magic can happen. And I also gotta respect too that the company's on a journey and everyone else is on their own journey as well. When you can align those journeys together within the brand, the most amazing things can happen.
Magic.
Magic.
Agree.
All right, I'm going to throw out some key takeaways from this. What I need is a yay or nay and a 2 or 3 word response to it. First takeaway, labor investment drives revenue, not just costs.
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
That was easy.
C.
Retention is your hidden profit center.
Yes.
Yes.
You
You can elaborate on this if you want.
I agree.
100%. Yeah. Internal promotion and retention is, it saves a ton of training time.
Yeah, trying to save 2% on labor can cost you 10% in sales.
Oh, without a doubt.
Third takeaway, your labor strategy must reflect your brand promise.
Yes.
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 Any elaboration there?
I think, your icebreaker story is a perfect example of that. Is at some point that team member, his training got cut short. And that was probably because they're trying to save some labor, but that negatively impacted your experience, and now you're up here talking about that in front of 100 plus people. That's a perfect example of cutting corners with training and cutting corners with labor has just a negative impact. You might save a couple pennies that day, but in the long run, you're losing hundreds. So,
I try and think about when that team member gets asked when they go home or when they go out with their friends to a bar, is not only how was your day, but what do you do for a living? I want to know what that answer is.
yeah.
And I want to be able to influence that answer. I don't want them to say, yeah, where I work in the restaurant business. I want them to say, I get to work with the coolest people in the world, and this is what happened. And one, they're your front line. They're actually recruiting for you, and they don't even know it, right? They're marketing your brand without even knowing it. So what's that answer going to be? And I think again, people first. And Jason said it earlier, if the lead step is always with that in mind, what's going to happen when they get deployed out there?
Yep.
And what are they going to say?
And I'm the absolute worst customer any of you can have for your restaurant. Not because I complain about the food or anything like that, but when I walk in, I'm evaluating everything that I see that has to do with operations.
I'm the same way. Yep.
With that, I think we've got a little time for some questions. There's a microphone right there. Where's Tim Tang?
Well, we have 3.5 minutes. We can start singing or something if you want.
They can sing, yeah.
Dan, tell me about the company or the technology that you're using. You mentioned you're using AI for prep.
Yeah. So there's this company called Pressy Taste, and they partnered with Intel. And basically, the ask was, I want to make sure hot food stays hot, cold stays cold, and I want to execute better. Can you help me do that? And that was that was kind of the opening line. And so we worked with them and understanding what our prep philosophy is, and we've integrated that in their technology. And we basically took a scalpel to every recipe and learned that one, we're not as good as we thought we were, so we'll start with that. But really understanding of what each dish should have, what you prep it in, what container it should be, and make sure you're consistent across the board. So once we deployed that, the next thing was, well, what about the change management from the staff? Oh my gosh, this gets scary. I've heard this last couple days. And what we realized was that they're used to this stuff. They're used to working on an iPad. They're used to doing things on their phone. They're used to being on a computer. Matter of fact, we thought there'd be a significant learning gap. No, it was more of a learning gap for us, to tell you the truth. And that was really special. And what we have found in the NROs, as an example you mentioned earlier, was that we typically have a 16-week normalization schedule to achieve cost of goods, as an example. We just did a restaurant in Austin, and it was our first deployment of this system. And they normalized the first period of being open. They're running better cost of goods than our company. They don't know anything different, right? And we're like, well, this is a home run. I can shorten this thing up to 12 weeks, you know? But my point being is that we were able to decrease that learning gap through our partnership with Pressy Taste, and for the manager, which is huge. But also, more importantly, if you're transferring managers, they have to understand I'm going to order something and I'm going to prep something, and then they don't know, and then you're out of food on a Sunday, you know. And then the cool thing is, in the future, if I understand what my sales are going to be through AI, like predictive sales, predictive prep, then I know what I'm going to have to order. Why is that important? Well, if it can predict what I'm ordering from my broadliner, instead of having the cash on the shelves, I have the cash in the bank. So now I can fund my own growth, or on a large scale, of course, because I don't know if you've seen how many points it is to get a loan out these days, but I can protect the cash flow. That's when the finance guy gets happy, right, when you're protecting the cash. So that partnership that you're asking about really kind of opened up these doors to look at things differently. And I would strongly suggest looking at that.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Great conversation, gentlemen. I'm really interested in any perspective that you might have around some of the training shifts, if in fact they've been necessary, with the core frontline demographic of workers that are in many restaurants. Right? We know that 18 to 24 demographic is what many of those individuals that are leading that customer service experience are in our teams. I have had repeated, really fascinating conversations with restaurant leaders who have said that they're observing an additional training necessary to help these individuals who are so digital first in their social experiences, and they are not as organically comfortable with person-to-person interaction, right? Because we're actually talking about entire generations of people whose social experiences have been phone first, right? And now we're in a hospitality environment where we want the technology to be there to provide the support, but we want the people to be able to come in and leap over top of that and then deliver the hospitality experience. I'm curious to know if that has something that has started to surface in any of your training, and how you are addressing that.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. So a couple years ago, we went for our cashiers, our team member cashiers, we went to talking points. And basically, we wanted their personalities to come out as long as they hit 4 talking points. But what we found is, with exactly what you're talking about, is their personality doesn't come out because they're not used to it. They're not used to that face-to-face interaction. And if you think about it, for 3 years, we told them, don't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
do not talk to anybody, don't get too close to them. And so it was really a failed experiment because they weren't comfortable enough to do it. So we went back to what we call scripted hospitality. So we had to have them go back and memorize the script, but once they had it memorized and they were comfortable with it, then their personality would come out. And so we just missed that point initially of having them comfortable with that interaction, and the comfortability in their interaction is knowing they have this whole script memorized on how they can address with the guests. But then once they got that, man, their personality started to shine. And so it's, you just have to get them in a comfortable situation and get them eye contact, get them comfortable with eye contact and smiling. And so we do a lot of that with the new training that we do, is just because they have to get out from behind that screen. So,
yeah, we've actually dialed back the technology on the training side, to tell you the truth. You know, the hot button for us a few years ago was the LMS system, and you have the iPad, and you do these things, and so on and so forth. But we've actually reeled it into whereas now it becomes very much of you start here, but now you're going on a journey in your training. So the iPad stays here now. So there's either exercises you have to complete or things like that. We got rid of tests, as an example, and it's more a validation on the shift, right? Kind of bringing it back old school a little bit, but we start with the technology, but we don't carry it all the way through. But we use it more as a resource more than anything else, and the source of truth versus do it this way, like, you know, because it becomes too scripted.
Yeah.
In hospitality, it can't be that way.
Yeah.
But that's what we've done. I mean, I've seen the young couple come into my restaurant and have a date, and they're texting each other across the table. That's wild to me, but that's the generation, right?
Yeah.
So it's making them feel comfortable being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and that's part of what the training does.